Presented by the Making Star Wars Podcasting Network. This is the Cantina Cast, your watering hole for thought-provoking Star Wars discussion, character dissections, quote and scene analysis, honest opinions on the Star Wars news that interests you, and whatever else these guys come up with. Here are your hosts, Mike and Joao.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 204 of the Cantina Cast. And, of course, it's me, Mike, and I am joined by Joao. Joao, say hello to the fine folks.
Hello there.
All right, well, Joao, today was, I guess you could call it Rebels Day. At the time of this recording, Rebels premiered today at 12:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is completely weird, and I still don't get that whole thing, but apparently... So anyway, I watched the first part of it last night before I went to bed, and then today when I got home, I actually had some time, and I watched the second part of it, Heroes of Mandalore, I believe is the episode title or whatever. And to be honest, Joe, I've joked about this on Discord, I joked about it with Becca, and I did with you just before we came on air here, and I'd said, is this, and I don't want to sound like cynical or mean, because I know there's a lot of people like Rebels, and I like the show Rebels, but I've always had this mixed emotion with Rebels. I mean, I remember when we did our Rebels reaction show, when we first started doing that, in the first episode of that, we even said, well, this isn't going to last long. But in any case, so today I watched it, and it just felt like this was the day that they came down and told Dave and company, all right, we're going to cancel the series, and, you know, we're going to do something else now, because it looked like that episode was like, for a season premiere, which is odd, because if you've said on the record a few times on the show, Joe, usually the season premiere and the finale is pretty darn good. Well, the finale was like subpar last year, and the season open this year was kind of, I didn't know where they were going with it. And then the one moment, now there's a spoiler if you haven't watched the episode, I assume you have, because it'll be almost 2 weeks by the time you listen to this, is the part where they use that super top secret weapon on the Mandalorians, Sabine's brother and mother and everything, and you get the impression that they're dead. And once again, they don't pull the trigger on a moment like this that would define a character and create some of that conflict within the character and stuff like that growth that we look for in Star Wars. It's part of Star Wars. Like, that is what happens in Star Wars quite a bit. And they couldn't do it there. And also with Sabine's father, all right, he's important, but then they rescued him and he's not even that important. And Sabine and the father didn't even have that big of a reunion. Even the mother and the father didn't until later on. I don't know. I know, granted, people were shooting at each other at that point and everything else. You can only be so, go down memory lane, I guess you could say. But, Joe, I don't mean to sound like a prequel hater, almost. But what are your thoughts on the first episode back, or the premiere of Rebels this year?
Yeah, I really haven't been enthralled with this series since, I guess, the finale of season 2. Season 3 didn't grab me at any point. There was a moment where I was like, okay, here we go. I think it was when Kanan was training Sabine. Like, I thought, maybe, okay, do we have a turning point here? We're going to have a good end of the season. And I thought that maybe the best show of last season was when she was fighting the other Mandalorian, when it was like lightsaber to dark saber combat. Like, that, from what I remember, might have been the best of that of last season. I haven't rewatched any of it. I've watched them all, but I didn't I wasn't like repeat viewing, so breaking it down really per se like we do with some stuff. I just watched it the one time for something to do, and that was pretty much it. So yeah, I mean, I was just watching the episode, and the entire time I was just like, yeah, it's probably good that this is the last season, because it doesn't feel like, I think what you were trying to say with the way it felt like, oh, they knew this was the last season, or, maybe it didn't, that's what I'm looking for. It doesn't feel inspired at this point to me.
Well, yeah, I guess, and that's my moment with, like, Sabine. Like, you think her parents are dead, or her mother and her brother are dead, and that would have been a a very defining moment, and who knows where you could have gone with that story-wise, but then they don't pull the trigger. The only time they really did it was in season 1 with the guy, the stormtrooper that was on the thing, and Callus threw him off or whatever. And then I think later in that year, the 2 Imperial agents, the Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor, took him out. And those are the only times you really saw where they went to that moment where, like, oh, wow, they went there. Now, hopefully at the end of the season, they'll do that with this, because this is the end of the season and they need to do that. But continue, Joe.
Well, I mean, that's just it. It's just, it's kind of like the whole Rogue One thing. Once this is over, how are you really going to continue to tell these characters' stories? They obviously weren't in the original trilogy. We know that Hera probably survives based on, or at least to Rogue One. Maybe she, maybe the ghost got blown up by, or got smashed by Darth Vader's ship in Rogue One. I don't know. But it just doesn't, it just doesn't feel like that there's ever been any true consequences on this show. They start off with, Ezra's parents kind of, they were dead, right? They were,
they died after.
There was some hope at one point that they could still be alive, and then he found out no, they did die when they were like in prison trying to escape from the Empire or whatnot. So that really seems like the only time they've ever been able to pull the trigger and give a character like an emotional, like something that is hurting them as a character and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's been a big part of they've just never been able to pull the trigger. And now it's like, are you going to pull the trigger at the end of this season and kind of give some of these characters a finale here and give them, because I do think some of the characters are pretty good characters, and I always say this like about like Ahsoka and even Ezra, and I know we joke about Ezra in the Discord, and everybody kind of says like, okay, this is the one character, even if you like Rebels, it's kind of hard to like him sometimes, just because he's kind of all over the place, and it's just like he's so naive, and he trusts all these different bad guy characters, and it's just like, when is he going to learn and smarten up and quit being an idiot, basically? I think they do deserve to have an ending to their story, and you just kind of question how would they ever do that if they don't end their story in Rebels, if they kind of just say, oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna just walk into the we're gonna walk away and live happily ever after, but the rebellion's not over, the war isn't over. So I mean, by the time Rebels, this cartoon has to end. So yeah, that's just where I start thinking. And I think that those characters they've created, I think in the least they do deserve a finality, an ending, and a end to their story, much like Ahsoka does. And still, even her character hangs in limbo. So, I mean, it's kind of frustrating from a fan's perspective. I don't want to get too negative on the show, because like you say, I know a lot of people enjoy Rebels. We have people in the Discord who really like Rebels, and people who enjoyed even these episodes. But for me personally, I just wasn't feeling it.
All right, well, let's get into some of our Patreon questions, and we'll throw it to this first one here, Joe, because it pertains similar to, we were kind of segueing into that, I guess you could say. But what does JW have to say? What was his question here? Let's see if we can answer what's on his mind.
Yeah. So JW Englehart from our Patreon, this is their monthly Patreon question that they get on the show every month. And so since today coincides with the premiere of Rebels, is there any ending to the series that could either redeem or ruin the show for you, or has it failed to establish the emotional connection for you to care one way or the other?
Well, I think we answered the last part of that. So let's say, is there an ending that would, I guess, redeem it or be satisfying with us? I think overall, I want there to be a finality to the series. I don't want things to be really open-end with this type of thing. I don't want to get into the Clone Wars thing. For me personally, I would like some have to die. I'm sorry, and I know it's a kid's show, but, it's Disney. They kill off characters all the time in movies and stuff. So, you don't have to be graphic about it, but you gotta and like even today with Sabine, and she gives Bo-Katan the Darksaber, which killed her sister at the hands of Darth Maul, and it's like, all right, that's a little weird, Because Sabine should have taken the role of the leader there. I think that's where her place was going and should have went. For me, now what I would like is maybe to Ezra die or in a sacrifice, or maybe even I personally want Kanan to just go off and be like Bindu and Obi-Wan and kind of find his Zen moment there or something like that. And obviously we think, well, Hera lives to Rogue One. Sabine, I don't know. Zeb, I'd like to think that they go off with Hera and continue to fight the rebellion and stuff. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's anything that's going to be too satisfying with me. I'll be happy that we've moved on from this era and kind of maybe branch out into something else. I guess you could say that's the best way I can answer it. I don't know. Is there anything that's going to redeem it for you, Joa?
Oh, I mean, redeem or ruin or failure. I mean, there's some words here in this question, and I guess maybe they're phrasing it this way because obviously, JW, they listen to the show and they know that we're not always we don't always give Rebels rave reviews. Tonight, another point in case of that, and that's why we don't talk about it too much, guys, because we know if we're not positive on stuff, we don't want to sit here and beat something negative into the ground over and over and over. So a lot of times, unless we've got something a little bit more positive to say, sometimes we just try to stay away from those topics. But since it was a season premiere and then this question was asked, so we'll talk about it. But my point is that I don't know that there's been a failure of emotional connection. As I just said, I do hope that some of these characters get an ending. I think they deserve an ending. I always like Hera. I always like, and I think Hera has been totally underutilized in this whole thing. All of them are down there fighting, and where is she at? She's just written off the show basically because
stuck on the ship.
Yeah,
that was
basically.
Season 1. She was like maybe on the ground twice, I think. Maybe we had a whole thing like, oh well, Hera's on the ship again or whatever.
And maybe that's misguided because the way that John Jackson Miller wrote her, and maybe that was never their intention. But they published the book that way. I mean, they didn't tell him, "Hey, no,
Dave
she's
was
just
involved
sort of like
with it." So yeah.
So I mean, the character just from a fighting standpoint, she seemed way more, or maybe I'm misremembering, but I felt like she was really kind of like had some more skills than just piloting, and obviously she's strategic and she's smart on the cartoon and the show and stuff. So I don't know. I think that's been one of the big, huge disappointments for me, is because I think that Hera was well written in that book. I just think she was just underutilized. But I mean, I still like the character still, even though, and Kanan, and you kept wanting things to happen with Ezra, and they hinted at it so many times, and now it's like, are they even going to go there with it, or like have those moments already kind of been flashes in the pan, and now that's never going to happen? So, I don't know. The only thing I can see this leading to is that maybe somehow they're involved in that attack on Scarif, and that's the season or the series finale. I don't know how else you tie it in or how else you end it, because you're not bringing Vader back. Thrawn, I don't know. I mean, is he the big bad? I guess that really their final bad guy that they're going to face, when they've already faced the likes of Darth Maul and Darth Vader. It kind of feels like I know Thrawn is popular, but it feels like a little bit of a letdown if that's their final adversary when they've already faced basically more powerful adversaries, especially when you're talking about Kanan and Ezra. So I have a hard time fathoming what they're going to do to end the season with. I think I don't know that there will be this really great ending, because I think the show's felt uninspired for more than a season now. So I don't know where they could possibly go with it. So no, I don't think that there's anything that they can do that's going to make me say, okay, this was all worth it, and that season 3 and what we're starting to see here in season 4, like, oh, okay, well, now it all makes sense. Now it makes all those other episodes that I didn't really care about before, makes them all better. No, I don't think it can do that.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you, but you never know. Maybe we'll get surprised. Maybe it'll have some tie-in with Rogue One. I don't see it because then it's like I don't know. We'll see. Well, hopefully we'll be surprised. But in any case, what's up? What's our next Patreon question, sir?
Okay, we're gonna talk a little more trailer here. Imperial
sexy talk. Yeah.
Imperial Moonwalker. Yeah, because I know we just lost half our listeners talking about Rebels, but
that's so mean, but it's true. But anyway, go.
Well, I can see the numbers, so I know
I see them too. I know.
Anyway, so let's just quit talking about it. Imperial Moonwalker wrote this in the Last Jedi trailer. We all agree that you have to consider there is likely misdirection. I'm torn with the Kylo Leia scene where he's hesitating the fire. The emotion from Kylo seems to tell me that it is indeed Leia he's hesitating to shoot, but I've also learned now that the sequel trilogy / standalone film trailers are misleading or contain scenes that don't make the final cut. My question is, if it is not Leia that Kylo is hesitating to shoot, who could it be? Thanks. Love the show and access to Discord. Keep up the good work. Imperial Moonwalker. So, it does look like that scene to me it's slightly cut differently because you see this guy behind Leia walking and he's just kind of casually, even I think it's a little goofy.
I have a theory behind it though.
And he's just kind of casually walking but Leia looks awfully concerned to me. Maybe they don't. Now it looks like he's actually flying into their ship. And that's how he's actually going to be able to fire this missile or whatever. And that's how it's going to hit them directly where they're at, more so than it would if he were to shoot in like the outer hull of their ship, because they would have shields and stuff up, I guess, right? And so it's going to take a lot more firepower to take it down. So it looks like, according to the trailer, he's flying into some sort of ship. I don't know if it's a First Order ship or whatever. And so maybe Leia is the only one who senses the danger, the immediate danger. But you would think if they're in a big space battle that people aren't just casually walking around. So I guess I get where this is going.
You want to know how I've pieced it all together? I'm going to tell you, folks. Hopefully it's not too spoily for you folks, but I get the impression that Kylo and company goes to Dakar. Is that the name of the a base that they were at?
Close enough.
Yeah, I guess that's what I can't remember off the top of my head, but you know what I'm talking about, where they were, the Resistance was hanging out. They obviously know where they are because they were going to fire on it. They were going to take it out, and, you know, they were able to stop Starkiller Base and everything. My impression is that they know this, and we see all the ships coming in or whatever, and on my Lego box that I have here of Kylo's silencer, it shows his ship going to that planet. So I'm assuming they were going to attack the base, and this is Leia escaping and getting away and whatnot.
Well, and it is early in the movie because correct. Kylo's still wearing his Band-Aids. So.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait for those carbon fiber Band-Aids. But, well, my theory is that she's getting away and then she senses Kylo, which is why you see the people walking around behind. They think they got away. And I think she's feeling, okay, this is, and I kind of hinted that in our reaction episode. I think that she's starting to sense things like Luke when she was away from Luke. And when they were getting away and it clicked and she could feel his presence and all that other stuff. It's the same thing here, but Kylo's coming. Now, when you watch that clip, he's attacking the bridge. It's lit up on his screen. He's getting ready to fire on the bridge. But before that, there's a shot of it looks like the ship is blowing up on the inside. Like there's an explosion happening. You got to look at it real quick. And of course, like you said, he flies inside a ship. Now, is that Snoke's ship or is that Leia's ship? I don't know. And by the way, the ship is named the Raddus after, what's his face? Raddus in Rogue One there, who died and all that other stuff. So I think that he does take her out. And I said on the reaction show, I think this is the one thing, because we're going to get into the misdirect in a second here. I think this is the one shot that was actually truthful in a way. It just was cut a different way than it probably is in the movie, where it would lead you to guess, is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. Probably not. and so forth. But now, and this seems to be a big thing that happened in Discord, and I was a little surprised by this, Joa, and I want your reactions on this as well, is where a lot of people were taken back by the fact that you and I would come out blatantly say, don't believe everything you see, because from history, we judged it based on history, that 99% of the stuff you see in the trailers is not even in the movie, even the dialogue, all this other stuff. It gives you the feel for the movie, but it's a big misdirect.
I wouldn't say 99% of it's not in the movie. I would say 90. I would say a large percentage is misdirection, and the lines. Good luck. I mean, probably maybe 99% of the lines in the movie will either be some kind in some other
alteration of it.
Yeah, like some subtext. I mean, I put in the international trailer of The Force Awakens, and I said, well, y'all know what's in the movie. Now go watch this international trailer again. And it's like narrated by Maz and all that, and none of those lines are in the movie. And it's just, it's just like, oh, there you go. I mean, and the original lines by Snoke in the very, very first teaser of the Force Awakens trailer, like they don't even, I mean, they changed his voice from one point to the other. And, he does say stuff about the awakening, but he doesn't go into the light side and the dark, at least not in that speech. It's not. Yeah. So, I mean, it's all clipped together and lines are tied together that aren't coinciding with each other.
Scenes as well. Yeah.
So what's overlapped on the screen doesn't mean that even if those words are in the movie, it doesn't mean that they're talking about that character.
Exactly. But I was a little surprised that people were surprised by the whole, and I guess maybe, and I can't remember who it was in the Discord I was talking about, and he'd said, well, I guess, and I'd said to him, well, Star Wars is a little different because we're crazy, number one, and we analyze every nook and cranny of the trailer. And I know other fandoms do, like Marvel and stuff like that, but they're not, I don't think, as crazy as we are. In Star Wars, they kind of misdirect us a little. Like in Marvel, I don't think they really intentionally just kind of, like I've always said, they film things just to film things for the trailers now, for Star Wars, just to throw us way off. And especially with that line with Mark saying, this isn't going to go the way you think. I personally think Mark and Ryan got together to do that. I have no basis for it. It's just my wild, wacky tinfoil hat theory with how things are going and stuff like that. So were you taken back by people being shocked by the fact that it was more misdirect than anything? I mean, we don't know for sure, but we're basing it on what The Last Jedi was, Rogue One was.
You can't know what, but we don't, and we can't know what the misdirection really is at this point. And like I said it on the last episode, well, not the last episode because that'll be one we recorded way before, but the trailer episode, I said that the minute we start saying this part was misdirection and this part wasn't, then we're misdirecting ourselves. And that's true. That's what they want. Like, because we can't know all you can do is say, look, and this is the way we did it on the show. We gave a warning. Look, doesn't mean any of this is in there. It doesn't mean that it's not in there in the final cut of the movie, but just know that don't go with all your chips in. Don't go all in here and with your theories and whatever. This has got to be the way it is now because the trailer showed us this is where the movie's going. I just don't go that far with it but we're still going to break it all down and we're still just going to treat it as, we're still going to come up with theories based on it's in the movie, but we're not going to go full in and say, well, it's got to be this way. I'm all in.
It's not set in stone.
I think people have wanted to go all in and say, this is the way the movie's going to go. After seeing the trailer, like I'm more confused than ever.
Oh yeah, this is
about
the first
where the
time
movie's going to go.
This is probably, and this is the wild card we've talked about on the show. This is the one, and I've said it to a handful of people, Becca, you, and a bunch of others. I've said, this is the first time I'm actually scratching my head. And I'm usually in the ballpark. We're usually in the ballpark with a lot of these things, Joe. I feel like we didn't get any answers at all that night. I remember the first thing we were talking about, like, well, yeah, we got no indication of anything. And we always try to say, don't get hitched to your theories too much because you're probably going to be you can't hold on to your theory in a trailer. I'll just say that. There was absolutely no evidence for what I want it to be, which is hers as Rey as Luke's. There was absolutely no proof in that whole episode, which might be, as we've said, which is probably the proof that she is. If you're into Rey and Kylo being a thing, well, there was certainly that evidence there. But who knows? At the end of the day, no one really knows. It's up in the air. Ryan likes to pull, these things where makes you think, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I love it. It's just driving me. The whole who is she or isn't is driving me nuts, and I'm tired of that argument. I don't even want to get into it here. But Joe, back to his original question with Leia and Kylo. Do you I think you might have answered it, but do you think that he does it here, or no? It's not at all. It's just a misdirect.
Well, there was some early rumors about something about Leia, and this was even before Carrie and that whole and her passing and everything. I don't want to get into specifics on that. We can talk about that in the Discord because we have a spoiler speculation channel. I don't want to get into that on the podcast, but just based on those rumors, I feel like that. I feel like somebody takes that shot. I'll just say that. I don't know if. Here's the thing. I mean, it seems like for 2 years there has been a large segment of the fan base that's sitting here saying, "Well, Kylo's going to get redeemed," and even people maybe who aren't necessarily fans of it see that it heading that way too. It's very hard to argue for whatever reason. It just because it feels like, okay, well, that's a theme of Star Wars being redeemed, and somehow, some way. But if he just killed Han and then he goes through and then ends up being the result of Leia's death as well,
there's no coming back, man.
Yeah, I don't. To me, you can't sell that to the audience. You can sit here and try and then he. I'm not saying that he couldn't. You can't do good from here on out. He could, but
in the
nobody's gonna buy it. Nobody's gonna buy it. Like nobody's gonna say, well, okay, well now all of a sudden he killed both his parents in two separate instances, and now I'm supposed to trust this guy or believe. I think it could be. We've talked about is Benicio del Toro? Is he the Lando? Is Rose the Lando? It seems. What if I think Kylo's the Lando?
Well, that's been a recent
what
thing,
if he acts like he's going good, and it's all a misdirect in the movie, and it's a complete swerve, and then he's just more bad than ever? I mean, God, I couldn't imagine some of these. Some of the fans would go absolutely nuts because they're so into Kylo turning into good and redeeming himself. If he pulled something like that, it would be
the old switcheroo.
I haven't seen anybody predict that, where it's like, okay, he's bad, then he goes good, and then it's like, nah, I'm gonna stay bad. So yeah, I don't know if that would really happen, but it's crossed my mind.
All right, for the sake of time, we'll move into our next question. Who's up next there, sir?
Oh, it's the biggest Kylo Ren fan in the galaxy. Katie wrote this in. No. Oh, yeah, I wrote in this question. I paid $5 to be able to write my own question in.
Of course, why not?
No, this is Katie. She says, "Hey, guys, and I have some questions about Mike's favorite characters in The Last Jedi." Uh-huh. So in The Last Jedi, the Force tree that is on Ash 2 always reminds me of, if it is a Force tree, I'll just throw that in there, reminds me of Yggdrasil, the world tree in Norse mythos. There were other trees as well, all symbols of the Force, if you will, of life. These trees also, I guess she's talking about in the mythos, these trees also have birds associated with them, namely roosters, which sat on the top and foretold the Norse apocalypse Ragnarok. Basically, all were attuned to the gods and the fate of their existence. So naturally, I find it interesting that where we have life, a life tree, we have birds of sorts, or Mike's favorite character, the Porgs. Ugh. So, Porg question for you guys.
We were doing so good where we didn't have mentioned Porgs.
I think we went longer. We had to have gone longer than any Star Wars podcast.
Exactly.
I think maybe we had mentioned them initially, from that behind the scenes trailer. Hold on, let me just finish your question first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think there is any significance behind why the Porgs are native to the location of the first Jedi temple? Do you think it is possible that Porgs can sense and use the Force, kind of how Tourette could in Rogue One? In other words, do you think they are blind? No, I put that in there. Do you think that they are sensitive to the Jedi or the gods, if you're running with the Norse parallel there, and the balance of the Force? Or is it possible Norse parallel, the fate of the universe? Thanks. Talk to you guys in Discord. So I guess this is the old, what significance do the Porgs play, and are they
in the tree
to the Force? Or
well, let's get into the tree first. There's two things way I look at this tree. The tree itself, it's funny because I'd mentioned on the initial reaction, I'd said, doesn't that look like it looks like the inside of a tree where the books are. And it also looks like Bindu a little bit if you look at it, the way it's shaped and everything. But it feels like that tree is too small for someone to walk in. Now, maybe there's a cave, you walk in and you go through it, and it's kind of like the cave with Luke or whatever. I don't know. The tree itself, I'm not sure if it's some kind of a force tree. I mean, that's the indication. I don't know, but trees do play an important role in mythology and things of such, and so there is some kind of an importance. And I almost get the feeling maybe it amplifies the Force, and when she's around it, that's when she's going to have her crazy visions and freak her out. That's probably what it'll be. But what are your thoughts on the tree? Because you said you're not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that, because the reason why I've been backing off of my Force tree theories lately is because I read how they were made up for the comic Shattered Empire, and they just went and they didn't want it. Basically, they said, I forget what the guy's name was. Was it Rucka who wrote those comics?
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah. And he said, well, he was talking to the story group, and they were like, yeah, like he said holocron, and everybody kind of like sighed and was like, more holocrons. And so he came up with this Force tree idea. So that's where it kind of made me think, okay, maybe the Force trees aren't actually all that important, because it was just it was just a MacGuffin for Luke to just have to go into Palpatine's laboratory or whatever and just go find something. And that was the point of it. It wasn't that it was some greater significance or some greater storytelling device. It was just a reason to put Luke in a situation. It's basically that fruit that Hera sends Zeb and Ezra after in Rebels.
Mulan fruit there, whatever. Mulan, whatever the heck.
Mulan Rouge fruit? I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of put me off of Force trees a little bit, even though I love the idea behind them, or where you could go because of mythology, because you could go with the Bodhi tree that the Siddhartha sat under and became the Buddha, sitting under the great fig tree, and he touched the ground when the demon lord came after him, and the ground shuddered. And we just saw that in the trailer, and they called him the Awakened One. The Buddha is the Awakened One, and Rey says in the trailer, "I'm awake," and then I was awake, and it's called the Force Awakened. There's like so many parallels, and I think we're going to do a topic on this in a few weeks, because I am in love with the idea on that, but it does tie into the Force tree stuff. So either way, there's this tree and there's birds there. Or
well, let me say this.
I think they're kind of like, to me, they just look like Star Wars penguins, I guess, is what they are to me. But they are but they're birdish. I mean, they have wings. They're definitely some kind of bird. So
it's a flying rat is what it is.
So
that's exactly what it is.
It's a rat with wings. But I think the point still remains is that there are those mentions of the world tree or the tree of life, and there are these birds that hang around it. Now, this tree doesn't seem to be really flourishing, though. It
seems
this point.
Lifeless, right?
Yeah, it's like the husk of a tree that was once alive, and maybe that's the point, because maybe the light is starting to go out of the galaxy, and maybe it's not thriving right now, and maybe something happens and maybe it'll come back to life one day. I don't know. That's complete hearsay. Not even hearsay because I'm the only one saying it. So, so I didn't even hear it. I just said it. But yeah, that's where I'm going with it. Just as far as the tree and stuff, I really like the idea behind it. I'm just not sure that it is what we hope it is.
Well, I'll say this with the Force tree thing, with the story group and that. It might have been one of those things that came up, they liked it, and they said, all right, well, it's good enough for this, but maybe we'll come back to that because it's kind of a good idea. Kind of like when we do the show at times, Joe, we come up with something like, well, let's hold on to that, and we'll get back to that, and then something snowballs into something bigger, and which is what I think they did with Snoke, too, because Snoke's story has finally been done, I guess, in his backstory or whatever. So when we find out he's Plagueis, that'll be great. Just kidding. But anyway, as far as the Porgs go, and I'm going to rain on Katie's parade here because I think this, I feel the need to do this. I would suggest going to listen to Coffee with Kenobi. I think we said it on this show, the show that I was on, and I had Mark Newbold on with us. We were on, and he said the whole reason we got Porgs is because of all the birds that are there, the puffins or whatever, and filming, and they're all over the place. So they had to fill scenes in with that instead of going in and doing what they do, I guess. I don't know. This is just what was told to me, and and I trust Mark, so... in any case, they're really just there to be there. Now, what I do like, are they part of the Force? Yeah, we all are, I guess, in the galaxy far, far away. And as I said on the review show, I said with The Last Jedi, I said, is this planet, well, not the planet, but like maybe this island is like an amplifier of the Force itself. You got the caretakers there, you got the Porgs there, you got the Force tree there, and then, of course, Luke's there. So maybe there's a lot of special things going. You get maybe this sea monster thing that's going on. So it's an interesting thing. I think that's the whole point of it, is Luke went there because there's life and there's a balance there, or some kind of a Force connection there that's strong, and that is why he's there. So I don't know. I like the idea of them being connected, like she said, with the Norse guards and stuff like that. I like that. That's an interesting take on it. Does that mean I like them more? No, Katie. So no. Just no. But anyway, continue, Joe.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if if they have a greater significance, but also there are going to be some things that are just window dressing because to make the world feel lived in, to make the world feel populated. So not everything is going to be like a great character or great significance to the overall story. It's just something. But if Chewie obviously, has a kinship with at least one of these things, if not more, and then brings them, and one of them comes on the Millennium Falcon. So whatever reason that is Chewie. Does he have a pet now? I don't know. Is this just he's replacing Han with a Porg? Does he name the Porg Han? I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities with that. I don't know. Not. I mean, I don't. I feel like if you go too far with it, they do become Ewoks, and then it's like, okay, like, because what are they gonna do with the Force? They don't communicate in basic. They scream apparently, and so what are you gonna do with them if they do commune with the Force? I mean, is Luke gonna have some meditating scene where he grabs the Porg's wing and that just seems ridiculous. Like, I mean, just even picture that. I don't know what you'd even call that. You call that Lorg, Luke and the Porg relationship. So, no,
that sounds like a good punk band, though. Luke and the Porgs. I like that. But continue.
No, I mean, I have a hard time seeing where they're going to be totally significant with it. They don't bother me at all. They don't bother me like they bother you, which I think that you're kind of being facetious with how much they really bother you, because I don't think that they bother you that much.
No way, not me.
I'm other people. Else. Well, yeah, I know people take you at your word a little too much, I think.
No, not me. All right, well let's get into our main topic here, which is kind of a unique topic in a sense that we don't get to talk about Finn all that much, and we've wanted to, because Finn is one of the more likable characters in the galaxy. He was a pleasant surprise for me in The Force Awakens. I liked him, and I thought John Boyega does a great job. I like John. He's very friendly and fun and all that stuff. I'd love to meet him, actually. He's probably one of the Star Wars characters or actors I would actually meet and talk to where he wouldn't shatter that glass ceiling that I have, like that idea that I have of the character. Maybe because it's too early, I don't know. But in any case, John does a great job, and Finn's character is great, and it would be interesting where we go from here. And like you got in the notes here, Joe, we see Finn. You know, it's funny how you'd mentioned this before we got on the air, because it's you know, what you had from coward to the resistance fighter in a way. And in a way, he wanted to just walk away from that when he was at Maz's castle and everything. And you couldn't really blame him. But as you said before we came on air, actually it took a lot of guts to get the heck out of the First Order. And then, so he gets out of the First Order and he's at Maz's castle and they're getting back into a war with the place that he just got away. I don't blame him in a way. I don't look at that as cowardly as you would normally do, because it's like, all right, I'm trying to get away from that and I need to get away and do my thing and just get the heck out of here. But then he finds it within himself and he becomes a resistance fighter, and a pretty good one at that. But well, what are your thoughts on from Stormtrooper to coward to, I can't call him a coward. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, and this is, I wanted to do Finn, and I think maybe we'll talk a little Poe next week, because this is, now we're in the full midst of 100 days of The Last Jedi. So I want to talk about characters that are going to be in The Last Jedi, like we did last week with Leia. So now so I want to talk a little Finn this week. So Finn finally gets some love. And obviously we do a show every week. We've had plenty of opportunities to talk about Finn, but like so many others, it seems like he's like this forgotten character. And we mentioned it in the trailer episode, like he really wasn't even featured very much. Even in that, they really focused on the big the new big three, I guess you would call it, which
Rey
is
and Kylo
Rey,
and
Luke, and Kylo, which is seems to be at least for that movie. So, but yeah, I really was thinking about this, and he chooses not to shoot, and you could say, well, the villagers on Jakku, and was he just afraid to kill somebody, or I certainly see that as is doing the right thing, like knowing what he was doing, coming to the realization that this is wrong. And that's where I'm looking at it from, more than like, I'm too scared to kill somebody. I mean, he was not following orders, and that's very dangerous. And
see,
then
but the thing with him is when we were, I believe he says in the Force Awakens, I was taken from a family that I'll never see. He says he was taken from a family. Now, I got the impression that most of those kids were orphans from reading Aftermath and Phasma, the novel Phasma and everything, that these kids were orphans alone, and they took them, from Jakku or whatever they did, whereas Finn was actually taken from a family. And I find that interesting, because I think that plays a key role into why he doesn't do what he does. So maybe that's the reason why he does that. It's not necessarily because he's inherently good, and whatever. How old they took him, I don't know, but maybe they took him at a later age.
Well, somehow conditioning, that brainwashing wears off. Well, and it's because of his buddy there who dies right there in front of him, and it kind of sends him into an immediate shock or post-traumatic stress syndrome, like an immediate version of it, whatever you call it. I guess we'd have to ask Adam. Maybe in a couple weeks we'll ask him, maybe we'll bring that up to him off air and ask him and clarify that for us, like what would happen in that moment there. But yeah, I mean, so he chooses not to do that. And then just to go in, he makes up the lie, Ren wants the prisoner, and he gets Poe, and then he does all this. So, I mean, this is taking a lot of guts, because if he gets caught before they get to the TIE fighter, I mean, they're just going to probably execute him, I would imagine, as a traitor. So, I mean, this is taking a lot of guts at this point. And to be fair, when he tells Maz, you don't know the First Order like I do, he knows that they've got Starkiller Base. Like, Han and Maz and Rey, they don't know that. They don't know enough to be scared. He knows too much. I mean, he was stationed on the thing. So,
yeah, true. I
mean, so I don't know that you are. I mean, he probably doesn't see it as being a coward. He probably sees it as, this is literally an unwinnable fight because of this weapon they have.
Exactly. And, he witnessed them murder a village. So, I mean, Han and them didn't see that. So it's one thing to sit there and judge and say we got to fight when if you haven't witnessed what they're capable of, it's kind of hard to get into the fight, I guess you could say. But we'll get into a little bit of his rival with Phasma, because that was hinted in the trailer. It's been hinted, John and Christy, what the heck? I got her name wrong there. I've hinted at it. That they've been, Gwendolyn Christie, excuse me, have been going back and forth, joking around about this whole thing. And what we see in the trailer is interesting. But here's the thing. I don't get why Finn necessarily has a rivalry with her, other than, she was basically probably going to kill him, you could say. And she was his boss and was probably a hard ass on him. And then, we got what the confrontation with Chewie, Han, and Finn there, and they're meeting her there, and she lowers the shields, and she did it because, well, her main thing is survival, and she'll do what she has to do to survive. That's her main thing, which is an interesting trait, and I admire her for that. And I know a lot of people said in the novel she's a bloodthirsty, psychotic killer, and, well, maybe that's so, but, there are admirable traits to that, I guess you could say. I don't know. It's because I love Phasma, and that's my gamer tag. But anyway, enough about that. So my question to you, Joe, is what is the rivalry really between these two? I mean, Phasma, I guess maybe because her conditioning broke down in a sense, because Cardinal would start the training when they were young, and then she gets them when they're older to turn them into the bloodthirsty killers that they're supposed to be. And that didn't work. And, maybe she took that as a slight in a way on her. So maybe that's where she gets her thing from. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think she's mad that they threw her in a garbage compactor.
She's been in worse places. I can tell you that from the book, but go ahead.
Well, my point is that I think that maybe we're just basing this off of why is there there's a little bit of evidence, but we don't know what transpires in The Last Jedi itself. It could build the rivalry even more. And I think Phasma has plenty to kind of want to get revenge. And I think maybe trying to enact that revenge probably would even give Finn more
I guess the
incentive would give him more incentive to build this rivalry up. And what I find so interesting about, and I hope that happens, because when I started thinking about Star Wars rivalries, I couldn't really, when have they ever played it out and it's been like this really good thing? Like you have Han and Boba was kind of always hinted at.
But there's no evidence for that, really. Even in the old EU, it was
it's just it's kind of like kind of pieced together in headcanon. Like he talks about that bounty hunter on Ord Mantell, and then he takes Han the Jabba the Hutt. He had been looking for him, so I mean there is that actually happens in the movie. But before that,
he doesn't even mention Boba Fett till Return of the Jedi. Before
then he's just kind of freaking out. Boba Fett, where? And so it's kind of like this thing that fans have always wanted it to be a rivalry, but really wasn't ever. But now we could, and I can't think of many. I mean, you could say that maybe Boba Fett, and then this is using Boba again, but Boba and Mace, and that never had a payoff like in the Clone Wars cartoon or anything.
Yeah, that didn't pan out either. No, it didn't go the way we thought. Yeah.
So I mean, there's been kind of this lack, and I wouldn't call. I mean, and there's been other things, but Luke and Vader, that's not a rivalry. That was beyond a rivalry. That was something. Well, it
started that way, but it ended when he found out the truth, and it turned into something completely different. So
yeah, then it turns into Days of Our Lives. So I mean, it's
even with Obi-Wan and Vader, it's the same thing. It's just a little reversed in a way. You know what I mean? They didn't have that rivalry. I mean, granted, their fight on Mustafar was an epic battle, but that wasn't a rivalry either. I mean, they were friends up until then, and then you could even like Yoda and Sidious weren't a rivalry because they weren't going head to head for all those years. It was just that one moment. We've never had
Yoda didn't know he was going up against, and Palpatine always knew kind of, I guess, and
that's not a rivalry. You got to both know each other's things. Is basically
I mean, I think maybe on Palpatine's side it was just because of his lines. So, but then again, it still ends in a draw. So, I mean that's kind of like the subtopic that I was coming up with here is that we've never had these, and even there. I mean, we have to argue about what a rivalry is. I mean, so
true.
So I mean, I definitely would like to see this played up a little bit, and it would give Phasma some much needed relevance in the movie, because, as soon as we saw The Force Awakens, everybody was like, oh, and then she instantly became the new Boba Fett, for lack of a better analogy.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it was just like, okay, like she didn't do anything. Like she was just there and got embarrassed, basically. And then, it would be nice if there's some kind of redemption for her character, to at least, a redemption in the fact that her role is a little bit more important, and doesn't get embarrassed, like, just because that was just embarrassing. That was an embarrassing performance, Phasma. Not Gwendolyn, but Phasma.
It wasn't
Phasma. The character had an embarrassing performance, not Gwendolyn.
No, and I think the problem with that was the whole editing and how JJ wanted to tell the story. It wasn't so much even the character at that point. It's like, well, we only get so much time here. We got to concentrate on this, that, and the other. But yeah, I guess the only rivalry we had was maybe Mace and Anakin, maybe, sort of, in a way. I guess that was it. But other than that, I mean, I can't recall of one that's really a big rivalry. Like, I don't recall there being such a big, I mean, I know we've had it hinted at, but I guess it depends on your definition and your point of view of what a rivalry is. Here we have a very good chance of them, and even you have Kylo and Finn could potentially have a decent rivalry as well. And you could even say Daisy and Kylo, depending on how that dynamic, if she's a Skywalker, not a Skywalker, how that all is going to go, that could evolve into a pretty big rivalry as well. I mean, especially if he took out Han, if he takes out Leia and she finds out about it, and, that's going to hit her quite a bit, because Leia gave her hugs, said, "Force be with you," all that things, like, what I mean? So there's the potential. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let's just jump back. I want to jump back just for a minute before we wrap the show up about Finn being a coward again, because it was in one of those magazine articles. He was talking when he wakes up, all he wants to do is just go find Rey and go get her and run away again. And then he meets Rose, who kind of looks at him like he's a hero, and he never thought of himself that way. And it gives him like this confidence. And that's when he kind of really becomes the resistance fighter, because when he's on Starkiller and he gets injured, he's doing it to save Rey. Like, that's all he cares about, either that friendship or the romantic relationship that he wants to have with Rey, or whatever the case is. I mean, I think on Finn's part, I think he would love to be in a romantic relationship with Rey.
Well, he's not the only one, but
I don't think I don't know if she
feels that way.
Yeah, I think that he would love to. I don't know if she feels the same way. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with it if that's the direction that they wanted to go. I would probably prefer that they kind of wait till after 9 to maybe get Rey into a relationship to make new little Jedi. But I just like her character to maybe just not worry about being in a relationship. Kind of go the path of Luke, maybe, in a way. And because I've heard Mark Hamill joke, well, yeah, that in the books they finally gave me a girlfriend, so and he's like, but they wouldn't do it in the movie. So I always got a chuckle out of that. But yeah, so I mean, that's just a personal preference, but it wouldn't bother me too much if they went that route. But I don't think that they're going there. But it just kind of interesting that even then he wakes up and he's still not ready to be a resistance fighter. He's still not sold on the cause. But when somebody else shows like, hey, you're a hero. He is resistance, but he just hadn't realized it yet, according to what John has said about the character at the beginning of The Last Jedi. And that's not, I don't want to say that's spoiler stuff, because it's kind of been official released in interviews and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it just goes back to, he's not totally ready. Even on Starkiller, when he got injured, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm resistance now. It's he's just there for his own personal endeavors, basically, I guess you could say. It's just there to save Rey. It's not like, hey, I'm here to save the galaxy now. So,
well, is this a typical guy where he's hot for one girl and all excited about that, and then she takes off on him, and then he's kind of wandering around, didn't know what to do.
And then another girl shows interest, and then it's like, oh well,
yeah,
this girl actually showing interest in me. He's like, well,
exactly.
maybe I could live with this.
Exactly. Typical guy, and then he gets involved in something he probably shouldn't be involved with, like fighting a war in the resistance or something like that. I don't know. I'm just joking around. I don't know if that's where they're going, but for some reason it made me think of my goofy past and everything else. But
yeah, I don't know if it's a romantic thing with Rose or not, but it's at least like he's got a fan, it seems like. And it's just like, he's like, oh, okay, well, I can't disappoint, somebody like in, but he's ready to even disappoint Rey at that point. As long as she's safe, like he's ready to just walk away there at Maz's castle. And he's like, well, come with me. And she's like, yeah, we can't do that. And then he's like, stay safe, and he walks away. So it's like when somebody actually has confidence in him, it gives him that confidence in himself. So it's going to be interesting to see how John plays that as an actor on screen and how that ends up coming off. And I think it'll do well, but I'm glad we finally got to talk a little bit more about Finn, and I hope that his rivalry with Phasma, I hope they have a good fight. It looks like it's going to be a pretty epic fight. And,
well, as long as they don't go Rebels and not pull the trigger on people getting hurt and stuff, I'll be happy. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't want it to be softball.
Well, I'm gonna wait and do my prediction until the final hype. As far as at the end of November, the last episode in November, we'll do our final hype of The Last Jedi, and so which is not too far off. When you're listening to this episode, it's gonna be right around the corner. Actually,
I hope when he sees Rose and he goes, "Well, what have we here?" And I hope we can stop the rumor of who is Finn. So to speak, but that's just my own stupid. Yeah, well, hey, you never know. Lando
he doesn't have to be Lando's kid.
No, I know that. He could just say the line just for throwback and homage to Lando, who seems
maybe Billy D shows up and he sees Rose and he's like, well, "What the hell do you have here?"
Yeah, well, hey, it's a little creepy there, Billy. But anyway, so tell him where to like us, find us, and all that other good stuff.
You haven't heard of Rook?
No, I don't know. But go ahead. Tell them where to like us, find us, and all that stuff.
Oh, I thought you were telling me to go ahead on the Rook theories.
No,
never mind.
No.
Facebook.com/TheCantinaCast, at TheCantinaCast on Twitter and Instagram. You can check us out on our Discord channel. You can find that in the show notes, or you can just Google search CantinaCast Discord, and I think it'll send you a link right to it. And then leave us a review on iTunes if you want to. We've been getting a lot of those ratings and reviews lately, and we appreciate it.
And I will be getting back to reading some of those at the top of the show at some point soon. So I'll just throw that out there.
And so 100 Days of The Last Jedi continues next week. I think we'll find a way to throw a little Poe in there. And then we've got coming up in the future, we've got we're gonna talk some more Jedi in a way. We're gonna get into some symbolism and some history and try to tie it in some parallels, and we're going to get into what the Jedi were meant to be, what they should be, or just kind of theory craft and just kind of and talk about the Jedi once again. We've talked about it a million times, but
we're going to be 1,000,002.
Yeah, we'll talk about it from a little bit of a different angle next time. So,
all right, well, that's going to do it for us, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this show, and we will see you next week. You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.